Hello again, everyone. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Americans that have been detained in North Korea for the last 20 years. There have been 16 of them. This travel warning by the United States State Department, kind of interesting. They strongly recommend people do not travel to North Korea because it's dangerous. And they try to make it sound as dangerous as possible. For instance, in the second paragraph, first sentence of the second paragraph, at least 16 U.S. citizens have been detained in North Korea in the past 10 years. No, in the past 20 years. So on and so forth. And then, which is kind of amusing, the third paragraph. If you decide to enter North Korea against the advice of this travel warning, you should have no expectation of privacy. All electronics and multimedia devices, including USB drives, CDs, DVDs, mobile phones, tablets, laptops, yada, 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 they're going to look at them, totally go through them. Pretty funny stuff, especially when I just ran across this. The same day I downloaded that, I ran across this TSA, something from the TSA. You know, these are the people at the airports that put their hands down inside their underwear and feel around for whatever they're feeling around for. They like to take pictures of our naked bodies. They go through all our stuff, steal our money, steal our valuables. So now the TSA's got one more indignity. Now they're going to ask us to take out all our reading material and put all that in a bin. And then they say they're riffling through the books looking for contraband. No, they're looking at what we're reading. That's against the First Amendment. You have no rights. All your rights go out the door when the TSA deals with you. So don't tell me about North Korea, you know, when they're doing all this here. Okay, so I just thought that was funny stuff. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about Americans that have been detained in North Korea. I'm not looking at other nationalities simply because America is still in a formal state of war with North Korea. An armistice was signed on July 27th, 1953, but no peace treaty has been signed. So there's still the war going on. You know, it's not a shooting war, but it still goes on. So that's where we're at here. We're just going to look at Americans. And we're going to real quickly take them right from the start. And the first American that was detained by North Korea was on August 24th, 1996. And his name was Evan Hunsicker. Here he is here. And this fellow was pretty much mentally unbalanced. He wasn't all there. He had a really rough upbringing, really tough. And so he was kind of doomed from the start, broken home and just the whole thing. Anyway, he wound up in China, and he was over on the Chinese side of the Yalu River, drinking with some friends. And on a dare, they dared him to swim across to North Korea and come back. So he took off all his clothes, swam across the river, and they grabbed him. There you go. And they detained him. They couldn't figure out what he was up to. And so after 90 days, they released him. Apparently, he tried to hang himself while he was being detained. And less than a month later, after he was returned home on December 18th, 1996, he shot himself with his cousin's .357 Magnum. And that was the unfortunate end of one Evan Hunsicker. Then we move on to Una Lee and Lisa Ling, two journalists. And they thought it was a good idea to walk across the frozen Tumen River, which is kind of on the other side of the northern border of North Korea borders Russia, and China a little in there as well. So they walked across the frozen river looking for who knows what. Probably something to do with human rights or something, some sort of evidence of mistreatment of defectors or whatever. They had two people with them, two guys, a cameraman and an interpreter. And they got over onto the North Korean side, and the North Korean guards appeared. The guys legged it back over to the other side, and because they were faster than the women got caught. So this was on actually 17th of March in 2009, which was 12 years after Hunsicker. The whole 12 years elapsed before this happened. So the two women, they were both sentenced to 12 years corrective labor, and after 140 days they were released into the custody of Bill Clinton. And then we have the third guy, Robert Park. And he was another fellow that wasn't all there. He was mentally disturbed. And on December 25th, 2009, he walked across the frozen Tumen River, illegally entered the country. He had given an interview to Reuters, I think the day or two before, saying what he was going to do. So he walked across. He had something really bothered him about the concentration camps, the so-called, and camps and torture and whatever. And he was going to go over there and do something about it. North Koreans grabbed him, and they released him 43 days later. There you go. The fourth person, Ashlin Gomes. And again, this guy wasn't too swift on the uptake. He crossed the frozen Tumen River. I'm an American citizen, he said. I'm bringing God's love. God loves you. They grabbed him. And, he said, he's going to sentence, if he's going to die with people in concentration camps, he's going to die. He was sentenced to 8 years of corrective labor and released after 6 weeks. So, Gomes was institutionalized after he got out. He said he had PTSD or whatever. Then we have Eddie Soo Young, and not much is known about him. He was arrested for proselytizing, which probably, that's what the South Koreans said. He's arrested for proselytizing. He's probably, they knew he was a missionary or something like a lot of these people, but then he started doing political work in the guise of being a missionary. Not a good thing. Then we come to Kenneth Bae, which he was really a piece of work, this guy. Kind of a strange character. He ran a tour company called Nation Tours, and he was bringing people in and out. And he was doing charitable work. He was bringing food and whatever into people. And he'd been doing that for quite some time. Then he got hooked up with a group out of South Korea. And they were all about regime change. And so their plan was to use his tour company to bring in operatives, political operatives that would work to destabilize the North Korean government and collapse it. They had something called Operation Jericho. I think like the biblical reference where the walls of Jericho collapsed. And the Hebrews, led by Joshua, ran in and massacred everybody inside the city except for the town prostitute and her immediate family. So I don't know of Operation Jericho if they were going to massacre all the North Koreans or not. But that's what happened in the Bible. Read the story. So anyway, Kenneth Bae was sentenced to 15 years corrective labor and released on humanitarian grounds after 735 days. All the guy did was whine, moan, kvetch. He had all these medical problems. They kept running to the hospital back and forth. Nothing wrong with him. And they finally released him. Get out of here. Number 7 was Merrill Newman. Interesting fellow. Merrill Newman was 83 years old. and he had served as an officer in the U.S. Army during the war, the Korean War. And his job, he was part of this outfit called the White Tigers, and part of his job was to train saboteurs, guerrilla fighters, to send them north from the south. They send them north across the DMZ, and their job was to blow stuff up. Bridges, railroads, power lines, assassinate local officials, do whatever to raise hell, and work behind the lines as irregular forces. And so Newman came to North Korea thinking that the war was over, everything was hunky-dory, and for some reason he thought they'd welcome him with open arms, and he could look up his old compatriots, these ex-guerrilla fighters who were still living in the country. Apparently he had a whole list of names. North Koreans go, oh, there's a list of names here. Thank you very much. And he didn't understand what the problem was. Now, they treated him well. He was there for 42 days, and he had a nurse and a doctor in attendance with him at all times, and they checked his vital signs 4 times a day. Eventually released him, like I say, 42 days. But they kept the list. And of course, they looked these people up if they were still alive. And if they were still alive, they probably weren't for that much longer. Then we come to Matthew Todd Miller, another guy who was very strange, behaved very strangely. When he cleared customs in North Korea, he tore up his visa and started loudly asking for a political asylum. Authorities came running over. What's your problem? I want a political asylum. They take him in the back. What's going on? I want to be arrested, and I want to be put in a labor camp, and I want to serve like 5 or 10 years or whatever, and then when you let me out, I'm going to go back to America, and I'm going to write a book of how bad it was and make a lot of money. North Korean said, well, that's crazy. Why are you really here? He said, well, I'm here's a notebook full of stuff, and I'm with Wikipedia. Or not Wikipedia, WikiLeaks. So I'm with WikiLeaks. And I got all kinds of information that you might find interesting. I said, well, why are you really here? He said, well, okay, I've got information on secret American military installations in South Korea, and I'll give you that if you give me political asylum and also put me in a labor camp. So they were going to ship him off. They said, look, you're crazy. We're going to put you on a plane and get you out of here. He said, I don't want to go. They said, okay, fine. Have it your way. And what'd they give him? They gave him 6 years in the labor camp. Fine, 6 years. And then released him after 212 days. And he's out of there. Another really strange guy was Jeffrey Fowle. Figure this guy out. I don't know what his problem was. He was a maintenance worker, something for streets and roads for a small town in Ohio, I believe. He just married a Russian woman and just brought her to the United States. She couldn't speak much English. A couple of 3 kids, and he's working, and he's probably making $35,000 or $40,000 a year, and probably didn't have a lot of money left over. But for some reason, he took it in his head to go to North Korea and spread the gospel, I guess. He's a member of one of these churches, human rights. They mix a lot of politics with their theology. So they probably did a whip around at the church, and he volunteered to go to North Korea and spread the gospel. So what he did was, when he got to North Korea, he concealed his Bible in a place where he thought somebody might find it. And they found it all right. The authorities found it, and he was already on the plane when they went on the plane and pulled him off. We want to have a talk with you. Where's your Bible? Well, we found where you put your Bible. Interestingly enough, it was a bilingual Bible, Korean and English, and they let him bring it in. I mean, you can bring in a Bible in North Korea if it's for your personal use. Just keep control of it. Don't let it get away from you. But he hid it. And so they weren't too happy about that. And one thing led to another. They finally let him go after 170 days. But why this guy left his wife? Because she was, you know, she didn't speak much English and she had to shift for herself. And I guess he said, well, the church will take care of her. The church promised to, but, you know. Number 10, a fellow by the name of Arturo Martinez. He probably shouldn't be on this list. He's some kind of his mother said he was in a mental institution when he checked himself out. Then somehow he got a hold of some money on a payday loan or something online, something like that. Went to China, or went to South Korea, and tried to swim the Han River, the mouth of the Han River between South Korea and North Korea. And the South Koreans got him, brought him back, so he said, okay, fine. So he went all the way up in China, all the way around to Dandong, and then swam the Yalu River across. That's what he entered North Korea that way. Why he didn't go in on a tour? Maybe he didn't have the money. I don't know. But anyway, got in that way, and then he started spouting all kind of socialist nonsense about how wonderful North Korea was, a socialist paradise, how bad the U.S. was, and just going through all this stuff. Half the stuff wouldn't make any sense. So the North Koreans finally, when somebody asked, they said, well, he's not being held. He's here voluntarily, and he can leave anytime he wants to. So eventually he left. Like I say, he probably shouldn't be on this list. I mean, he entered the country illegally, but they figured he's harmless, so they didn't charge him. Sandra Su, S-U-H. She's an older woman. She'd been doing charity work, and she's a Christian. Belonged to some sort of church in South Korea. She'd been doing a lot of charity work, and somehow she crossed the line somewhere. And on April 8th, where is it at here? Yeah, April 8th, 2015, they nabbed her. And on April 8th, 2015, they let her go. Same day. So she probably shouldn't be on this list because she wasn't arrested or detained or anything. So there's two people that are probably not on it. Then we come to Otto Warmbier, and I've already done a couple of videos on Otto Warmbier. And you can go back and look at those if you want to. He went to China in the latter part of December of 2015. Went on a tour to North Korea. Got there, you know, New Year's Day. Tore a poster off the wall. They got him for a hostile act, and they gave him 15 years. And that was in, I believe, the trial was in March, sometime around March, and then in April, they gave him a brain scan, and his brain was dead, an MRI scan, and his brain was gone. So something happened to him between that. Some people say, well, he's mistreated by the North Koreans. You know, maybe so. That's very unlikely. What probably happened is the young man, in his despair, tried to end his own life, probably tried to hang himself. And the Obama administration had completely turned their back on him. They didn't send any representative. They didn't ask about his health, nothing. So for all that time, from January until March, he heard nothing from the United States government, nothing from his mother, his parents. So he figured, well, he's just totally abandoned. Nobody cared about him. And there's nothing left to live for. He's facing 15 years. He'd be 36 when he got out. And so that was it. And he was not emotionally stable. You know, he was crying and weeping and probably cried himself to sleep every night, thinking this was the end. Unfortunately for a young man, it was. Okay, and then there are two others. Sang Duk was a faculty member of Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, or PUST. And PUST is a was built, I believe, in 2010 by evangelical Christians. It's a huge university, and it's good size. And the faculty are all evangelical Christians, which North Korea doesn't have a problem with this. You know, any kind of an education is wonderful. They're just not allowed to proselytize. There might be some discreet proselytizing going on. There has to be a little bit of spillover. But what happens is that when it enters into politics, gets over into politics, that's where the line is. I'm not saying that Kim Sang Duk crossed that political line, but it could be. And the same thing with Kim Hak-song, the last one. He said he was a Christian missionary, and he taught at PUST, something to do with agricultural experimentation. And he was detained, and both of these are still there. I think Kim Dong-chul is still there as well, yes. Kim Dong-chul, Kim Sang Duk, and Kim Hak-song, they're both, those are the three Americans still being detained, and they're ethnic Koreans. So that's where we are. So what do we learn from looking at this? Well, there's probably really only 13 that we can have on the list, but we'll hold 16. And what I did is I quickly jotted down here, kind of put them into just categories so you get an idea. There were 8 ethnic Koreans that have been detained. Una Lee, Robert Park, Young Sang-jun, Kenneth Bae, Sandra Su, she probably doesn't count, Kim Dong-chul, Kim Sang Duk, and Kim Hak-song. So if you're not an ethnic Korean and you don't speak Korean, they probably, you know. Illegal entry. We had 5 people enter the country illegally. Him and Hunsicker, Una Lee, Lisa Ling, Ashlin Gomes, and Arturo Martinez don't enter the country illegally. You probably won't get now. Using politics or using your religion to disguise politics, or politics under the guise of religion, that's usually what the North Koreans accuse people of doing. You know, you're supposed to be a missionary, and all of a sudden you become political. And they really don't like that. So we got 6. Kenneth Bae, Jeffrey Fowle, Sandra Su, and then Kim Dong-chul, Kim Sang Duk, and Kim Hak-song. So they didn't stay in their lane. They started politics. Mentally unbalanced. If you're not mentally unbalanced, you probably won't get nailed. There's been 5 that I count. Evan Hunsicker, Robert Park, we've got Ashlin Gomes, Arturo Martinez, and I just threw Matthew Todd Miller in there for good measure. If you do get nailed, what's the chances of serving out your full sentence? 0. They won't keep you. It doesn't matter what they give you, they're not going to keep you, if this is anything to go by. So Lisa Ling and Una Lee and Lisa Ling got 12 years. They served 140 days. Ashlin Gomes got 8 years, and he was at 213 days. Kenneth Bae was given 15 years and was out in 735 days. Miller, Matthew Todd Miller, was given 6 years, was out in 212. And finally, Otto Warmbier was 15 years, and he was held for 529 days. And they shipped him back in a vegetative state. So that's really a sad story. But anyway, that's where we're at. You know, it's the North Koreans aren't, you know, they're not going to grab you just for the hell of it. I mean, you got to really do something. And then when you do something, and whatever they give you, they're not going to keep you for that long. They want to get rid of you. If you do get grabbed, just apologize, sign whatever they put in front of you, serve your time with a smile, and eventually you'll get released. But the point about it is don't screw up in the first place. Be nice, be polite, you learn what the rules are, you follow the rules. That's the same when you go anywhere. And you go to any country, you go to Thailand, Turkey, any place like that. It has rules, and you follow the rules. Be polite, be respectful. It's that old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I don't see anything scary here, despite what the State Department says. Perfectly fine. I mean, 800 to 1,000 Americans visit North Korea every year. So since 1996, there's been between 15,000 and 20,000 Americans that have visited the country. And out of those, 16 have been nailed. And you probably want to say maybe 13 or 14, because Sandra Su and Martinez, you can probably cross them off the list. So you probably say 14 out of 20,000. That's okay. I mean, that's what we can accept that. Just mind your manners and don't act silly. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that for the moment. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.